Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, I want to talk about silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the quiet you seek out at the end of a long day. I'm talking about the other kind, the heavy kind. The kind of silence that's really just a different word for loneliness. The kind that settles on a person like dust, filling in all the cracks until you're not sure where the silence ends and you begin. That's where we find Hollis Miller. Hollis was 36 years old, but the land and his life had carved deeper lines into his face than his age really allowed. He was a widower. No children to carry his name, no partner to share the hearth in his small, dark log cabin. He was a man defined by what he didn't have. In town they had a name for him, Giant Miller. He was built like an ox, with hands, they said, like hammers. But that's the mistake people always make, isn't it? They see the exterior. They see the strength, and they assume that's the whole story. The truth of Hollis Miller wasn't in his size. It was in his silence. He kept his words few and his world smaller still. He was a man who had accepted his lot. His life was a routine of chores, a solitary meal, and a long evening staring into the fire, the chair across from him just as empty as the other half of his bed. And then, on an evening just like any other, when the air was heavy with the smell of pine and coming snow, a sound broke the stillness. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a branch rattling against the roof. It was a knock, a sharp, hurried, trembling knock. In that part of the country, in the dead of winter, no one comes to your door after dark without a damn good reason. And it's almost never a good reason. Hollis moved to the door, pulled it open, and his entire world tilted. There on his porch stood a girl. She couldn't have been more than 7, small as a bird and near as fragile, her hair matted with snow, her cheeks blotched red with a cold that went bone deep. She was wearing only a thin dress, torn at the hem. But it was her eyes. They were wide, not just from the cold, but from a terror that had settled in deep. She looked up at the giant shadow filling the doorway and whispered the words that would end his silence forever. "They beat my mama. She's in too much pain. Please." The girl's name was Laura May, and her mother was Mary Ellen Carter.
Now Hollis knew that name, and he knew the name of the man married to her, Elias Carter. This is the hard part of the story. This is the part that tests us. Hollis had seen them in town. He'd seen Elias, a man quick with his fists and quicker with the bottle, barking at his wife in the general store. He'd seen her wilt under the threat of his hand. And Hollis, like every other man in that town, had turned away. It's easy to judge that, isn't it? But we've all done it. We hear the neighbors shouting next door and we just turn the TV up a little louder. We see a stranger in distress and we tell ourselves it's not our business. It's a private matter. Out there in the Old West, that wasn't just an excuse. It was practically a rule. You do not trespass on another man's home, even when you know that home is cruel. But hearing that name now from the lips of her child, it pierced him. The consequences of that shared silence, of everyone turning away, were now standing on his porch, about to freeze to death. He didn't hesitate. Not this time. He told Laura May to get inside by the fire, and he strode out into the night. He found Mary Ellen in a collapsed shack by Miller's Creek, just as the girl had said. She was a ruin, her face swollen and purpled, her arms bearing the raw red burns of a rope. And yet the first thing she says to him, the very first thing, isn't "help me." It's, "You shouldn't have come. They'll say things. They'll ruin you." Think about that. Beaten, broken, and freezing, and her primary concern is for the reputation of the man who has come to save her. That is the anatomy of shame. That's what abuse does. It convinces you that you are the problem, that you are the source of the trouble, not the victim of it. Hollis just looked at her, and in his low, quiet voice, he said only 3 words: "Let 'em say." He lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all and carried her back to his cabin. He laid her on his own bed, the only bed he had. He stoked a fire, tore strips of cloth, and with those rough, hammer-like hands, he began to gently, silently clean her wounds. Laura May climbed onto the bed and tucked herself against her mother, finally safe. And as the snow fell outside, blanket in the prairie, a new, fragile kind of warmth took root in that lonely cabin. But peace, as we know, is a fragile thing. The very next day, the saying that Mary Ellen feared began.
In the saloon across town, Elias Carter was already telling his story. But his story was different. In his version, he wasn't the monster. He was the victim. He roared to anyone who would listen that Giant Miller had stolen his wife, that Hollis had taken her into his bed. He wasn't shamed by his violence. He was enraged by his loss of property. And the men in that bar, they muttered, they nodded. They were eager for the drama, for the scandal. It was something to talk about during the long winter. Hollis knew what was happening. He wasn't a fool. When he went to town for supplies, the whispers followed him like his own shadow. Women would stop talking when he passed. Men would look at him with a mixture of mockery and curiosity. He had lived with silence his whole life, so he used it as armor. He said nothing. But the silence in his cabin had changed. It was no longer empty. Now it was filled with Laura May's cautious laughter as he carved a small wooden horse for her. He was filled with the soft sounds of Mary Ellen moving about, her strength slowly returning. This new life, however, came with a heavy price, and Mary Ellen felt it most of all. She was drowning in shame. To be in another man's home, under his care, she knew what they were calling her, fallen woman, shameless. The weight of this judgment came to a head when Hollis decided to take him to church. I think he did it because he wanted to give them back a piece of the world they had lost, to show them they didn't have to hide. But the world wasn't ready. When they walked in, the conversations stopped, dead. People stared. Mothers pulled their children away. After the service, the town's self-appointed moral guardian, a Mrs. Prudence Calloway, cornered Mary Ellen. With a smile that was all teeth and no warmth, she said, "My dear, it must be so hard, but perhaps it would be more fitting if you stayed with Ken. Folks are talking, you know." Mary Ellen, already trembling, just crumbled. But then Hollis's shadow fell across them both. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He just stood there, this giant of a man, and looked at Mrs. Calloway. His silence was louder than any shout. It was a rebuke, a shield, and a warning. Prudence Calloway's smile faltered. She muttered something about prayer, and she scurried away. That night, Mary Ellen sat by the fire. "I've brought ruin upon you. They'll never forgive this." Hollis looked up from the wood he was carving, and he said something that I think it's the heart of the entire story.
"It isn't forgiveness I'm after. It's peace. He wasn't doing this for redemption. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just a man trying to build one small, quiet place in a loud, cruel world where people could simply be safe. But Elias Carter wasn't going to let that happen. His rage grew. The whispers in the saloon weren't enough. He escalated. He promised he would gather men, ride out to Miller's place, and drag Mary Ellen back by her hair. Mary Ellen was terrified. "He'll come for me," she told Hollis, her hands trembling. "He'll never stop." Hollis just set his jaw. Let him come. The fear in the cabin was thick. That night, little Laura May crept up to Hollis as he sat by the fire. "You won't let him hurt Mama again, will you?" she whispered. Hollis, this quiet, solitary man, lifted the child into his lap. "Not while I draw breath," he said. It was a vow. And Mary Ellen, watching this, felt something fragile and dangerous stir inside her. Hope. She had once believed that all men carried violence in their hands, but here was a man who used his strength to shield, to tend, to hold a child. The final line was crossed a few days later. When Hollis returned from town, he found a note nailed to his cabin door. The words were crude, angry. "She's mine. Bring her out, or I'll bring men to take her." Hollis tore the note down, his fist crushing the paper. This was no longer just shelter. This was no longer just kindness. The world had chosen sides, and by opening his door to the broken, Hollis had declared his. The reckoning, he knew, was coming. And it came, as it so often does in those stories, hidden inside a storm. A massive blizzard rolled in, swallowing the prairie in a howl of wind and white. It was the kind of storm that forces the world to hold its breath. And in the middle of that storm, near midnight, Hollis heard it. Hoofbeats. He turned to Mary Ellen. "Get her into the back room. Do not open that door unless you hear my voice." He stood in the main room, rifle in hand, and waited. The pounding on the door was violent, furious. "Miller!" Elias roared from outside. "You think you can steal what's mine? Bring her out, or we'll drag her ourselves." There was drunken laughter from other men. He'd brought his posse. Hollis took a breath. He put the rifle down, and he unbarred the door. Snow and wind exploded into the room. 3, maybe 4 men sat on horseback, faces raw from the cold, eyes red with drink and rage. Elias was at their head, bloated with fury. "You've shamed me, Miller," he spat. Hollis stepped out onto the porch, the storm clawing at him, and his voice, low and steady, cut through the gale. "She was never yours to break." That was it. The challenge was laid. Elias screamed, "Drag her out!" And the fight began. The men dismounted, stumbling through the snow. But they were drunk, and they were fighting for another man's pride. Hollis was sober, and he was fighting for the lives inside his home. He moved with the power of a man who had labored his whole life. He didn't use a gun. He used his fists, his weight, his unyielding defense. It was brutal, and it was fast. One by one, the men faltered, their rage cooled by the storm and by the sheer, unmoving force of the man in front of them. They fell back, bruised and beaten. But Elias remained. His pride wouldn't let him quit. He got off his horse. "I'll burn this place to the ground before I let her stay," he hissed, his voice cracked with madness. And he lunged. This wasn't a brawl anymore. This was a duel. It was Elias's reckless, flailing rage against Hollis's steady, powerful defense. Elias was fighting to prove he wasn't small. Hollis was fighting to protect what was inside. Hollis was stronger. He caught Elias, slammed him against the porch post. He drew back his massive fist, the one they called a hammer. The temptation for vengeance was burning hot. "Do it!" Elias gasped, blood in his teeth. "That's what they expect from the giant. That's all you are." He was trying to drag Hollis down to his level, to prove that all strength is, in the end, just violence.
And Hollis, he froze. His fist hovered, because through the howl of the storm, faint and muffled, he heard another sound. It was Laura, crying from the back room. "Mama, is he gone?" That small voice, it cut through the rage, the storm, everything. Hollis looked at the man he held, and he realized something profound. Killing Elias wouldn't fix anything. It wouldn't heal Mary Ellen. It wouldn't make Laura safe. It would only make him a killer. It would only prove Elias right. Justice was not blood upon the snow. He lowered his fist. He let go of the killing rage. But he didn't let go of Elias. He flung him down into the snowdrift. He picked up his rifle, not to shoot, but to press the barrel against Elias's chest, pinning him. "You'll answer for what you've done," Hollis said, his voice a vow in the night. "Not here, not by my hand, by the law." He had made his choice. He wouldn't become the monster to fight the monster. He wouldn't answer the old broken code of the West with more violence. He would choose the new one, the harder one. He would choose justice. He would choose peace. This story, it stays with me, because it's not really about the fight in the snow. It's about what strength really means. Elias Carter thought strength was the power to control, to break, to own. Hollis Miller learned that true strength is the power to protect. It's the courage to be gentle. It's the willingness to stand in the storm, to take the whispers and the judgment, and to build a safe place for others, even when you're standing all alone. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.